So, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a few minutes to refresh yourselves. And we're eager now to move into part two of our time together, of our generative conversation, where faith and life meet, adult faith education, and really considering this carefully and we hope generatively together in terms of ourselves as a synodal church. Before we move to part two, will you join me in thanking our three conversationalists for our part one, Dr. Ann Walsh, Father Daryl Winkler, and Dr. Cindy Cameron. Thank you very much for an excellent conversation. I can tell from some messages coming my way, it has certainly sparked some things and stirred the pot. So thank you so much. Part two, as we mentioned, we're still talking about the same topic, but now from a different vantage point. And we will have the help of four very fine panelists to expand and enrich our insights on this topic. And again, we're here not as spectators, but as participants. And I invite you to really pay attention to the thoughts and insights, the challenges and invitations that arise for you as you listen to our presentations. So we have four panelists. Our first, and I haven't even had a chance to yet welcome her here today. Welcome, Sister Natalie. So Sister Natalie Beckhart, and many of you will know her. Natalie is from France and a member of the Congregation of Xaviers. You probably know well that she was chosen as a consultor to Pope Francis for the Synod of Bishops and is the Undersecretary for the entire project. And you may know her by her latest claim to fame. I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, Natalie, that she is one of the most influential women of 2023, according to Forbes magazine. So we certainly celebrate that with you. We look forward to hearing from you. And second, we'll hear from Dr. Catherine Clifford. And Kathy is a professor in the Faculty of Theology at St. Paul University. Many of you will know her as a very well-recognized and respected expert in ecclesiology and Vatican II. And Kathy was appointed to the Synod as a theologian and a voting member. We're very proud to have Kathy there as a voting member and participant in the way that she is. And Kathy's on sabbatical right now, so it's a special privilege, Kathy, that you take the time to be with us today. Third, we'll hear from Dr. Murray Watson. And Murray is a passionate adult faith educator and leader. I know this firsthand. We've had the privilege of Murray's partnership in our research project. And he's the faith animator for the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board in Ontario. And Murray has not only been a wonderful partner in our research, but any of you who know him will know that he's an esteemed voice for many important learning edges in the church, among them for the marginalized. And we're very eager, Murray, to hear from you today. And last but by no means least is Miss Christine Way Skinner. Many of you will know Christine as a frequent contributor to Novalis publications, including Living with Christ. We benefit often from Christine's clever and spirit-filled insights. Christine is also a longtime adult faith educator in a variety of roles, and currently she's a doctoral student at St. Michael's in a college in Toronto, and the focus of her doctoral thesis is synodality. So she will have a very considered and rich perspective to bring to us today. So we're going to be moving through our presentations in that order, beginning with Sister Natalie, and each presenter has about 8 to 10 maximum minutes to present something to us on our topic, which is a synodal church is an adult church. What perspectives and practices in adult faith education are needed for a synodal church? So we'll listen to each of our presenters. Again, pay attention to what's coming up for you. And at the very end, we'll have some time for some conversation. Sister Natalie, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carol, and thank you to all of you, all the organizers and participants. It's a great joy to connect with you from Rome, from the Synod office, and to be with wonderful people from Canada, where I had a chance to spend a few months. And I was very touched, in fact, to listen to the first part of the panel and to see how, through your research, you really retrieve what is synodality in a way, and what is at the core of synodality, the importance of listening, working with people where they are, meeting them, and you have highlighted in a way what, especially the Synod on Young People in October 2018 had as the main outcome. We have understood that the only way to transmit the faith today is with a synodal style. And so what came out from the Synod on Youth really meet with all you are experiencing. So I will draw from that to highlight a few perspectives. First, that was the model in a way that has been given for us, and I like very much your expression of lead learners, to accompany people in this, especially adults, in their faith journey with the spirit of formation. You know, this paradigmatic image of Christ, Jesus Christ on the road of Emmaus. That's the way. Jesus begin to walk with them where they are, even if they're in the wrong direction. He listened to them, to their experience, to their question, to their suffering, and then he explained the scripture and they experience a meal together. So this, I would say this is the answer, in a way, is to walk with people with this synodal style of Jesus Christ on the road of Emmaus. And it's very interesting also how you have seen through the synod, maybe the best fruit that we are hearing day after day, that is more and more implemented in parishes, in different councils, is this synodal methodology of what we call conversation in the spirit or spiritual conversation. And I am very grateful from what I have received from especially the bishops of Canada. When we met them and we were talking about the synod, they expressed that when they began the synodal process, you know, for the synod and synodality with the methodology we have advised, so being in a circle to listen to each other with silence, they said, oh, you know, in Canada, we were already doing that because with all our paths with indigenous people, First Nations, for reconciliation, when we began our conversation with them, they asked us exactly that, to be in a circle, to listen, what some people speak about generative listening. So it's, as you say, really to meet, it meets the human aspect. It's an anthropological way to be human and to learn. And it's very important. Pope Francis states that very often a synodal church is a learning church in which everybody has something to learn. The Pope, the Bishop, the pastor, it's with this vision, we have a lot to give. And even many of you, you have responsibilities, you are leaders to provide other spaces, experience for an adult faith formation. But we are, it's never one, just from one way. We are also ongoing learners. So what I would like to highlight with this spirit is really, you know, the synodal process has really insisted on formation as an urgent and permanent need in and for a synodal church. So it's really to embrace more and more this vision of a learning church in which everybody, all the baptized, whereas their roles, their positions, their vocation, their responsibility. We have to be ongoing learners. That means people on the move. And it's about helping people to understand and embrace a dynamic vision of their identity as a human identity and as a Christian identity. And as church, it's a dynamic vision of identity. And the synod has especially called for a formation that is not only initial, but ongoing formation with this vision of an integral formation. And I think that's very important to have in mind, that it's both, we have to articulate spiritual formation, human formation, theological formation, pastoral formation, all the dimensions of our life with this integral vision. The second point that is very important also, and you have one chapter in the synthesis report of the last October Assembly of the Synod, it's number 14. I encourage you to read it if you have you don't have it yet in mind. It's a synodal approach to formation, a synodal approach to formation. And what I have learned also through, during 30 years, I was involved in youth ministry, especially with young adults. So a lot of experience to give retreats, formation, project with young adults. You are always better when you do it together with a leadership team, especially with men and women, lay people, priests, consecrated people, not alone. And I think we really need to foster this synodal style of formation with a team, because people are different. They need, and you grow in faith and you grow in your journey also with figures of references. You need to be inspired by role models or people who can testimony, and we need a diversity. So I think it's very, very important to work where it's possible as a team for formation. My new point, my point now is also to insist what I have learned more and more through my journey and experience, not only with young adults, but also with all kinds of adults, especially today. And that's the vision of the synodal church. You have really highlighted the importance of relationships. It's about, and we understand more and more that from the beginning, you transmit the faith through and within relationships. And that's the story of the gospel and the story of the early church. And our role, the formator, in fact, is none of us. It's the Holy Spirit or Jesus Christ who can really form people for faith and for an adult faith life, we can say. And so it's our role is mainly to provide a space, an experience, a framework, some process, and I completely agree with you, to open processes that will enable people to be shaped or to be led and trained by the Holy Spirit. And mainly in our society now, that is less and less a structure in a vertical, hierarchical ways, but with more emphasis on a relationship, especially horizontal relationships. It's very important that people can share with peers in a spirit of mutuality. And those in charge of formation, we are those who will allow this experience and giving a safe space for this sharing and this training. So what I have learned, and that's my point also, is people today, they don't want so much a kind of very academic theoretical formation. through just top-down teachings, but they learn by doing. They learn through experiences. And I think we need really to foster formation through action, through projects, through experiences, with this vision of an integral part. Formation should be integrated in all aspects of church life, in a way. And we can really see what the synod is doing. The synod is a school of synodality. You don't learn synodality, even if it's nice to have good talks about synodality and good theologians like Catherine and others who are writing. We need that. But you really learn synodality through exercises of synodality on which you can reflect about this, what you are living, and discern how you can move forward. So I will stop here because I think the best way is not so much to talk, but through experiences and action and mission together and life together, we can be a community of learners and learn from each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sister Natalie. You've given us some very rich perspectives in those few minutes. Thank you. And we look forward now to opening ourselves to receive what Dr. Catherine Clifford would like to add in her presentation. Kathy.
Thanks so much, Carol. It's good to be with you today and to hear your experiences also and what you're learning as adult faith formators. And I can only, I think, underline some of the points that have been raised by Sister Natalie. The goal or the proposal and the objectives laid out in the synthesis report that came out of the Synodal Assembly this last October really wants us to commit ourselves to developing structures and practices that will enable us to provide a permanent culture of ongoing Christian formation through all of life's stages. I think we've done a very good job in North America since the Second Vatican Council of liturgically based catechesis. And we've done very little with adult faith formation. And too often, we lose people after confirmation class. And so we have to develop this culture. And the Synodal report also proposes the model of the RCIA program, which is intended, again, not to be a program, but to do exactly what you've been talking about, but to be a process. Are we even in the celebration of the RCIA program, since we're really on the eve of the Lenten season and we're thinking about our accompaniment of catechumens who are preparing to be baptized or received into our church. Are we prepared to say this is not a program, but that it's sufficiently flexible that we can accompany people who might be at different stages in their faith journey, and they may not all follow the calendar year in the way that we're really would be more convenient for us and for our communities. But beyond Christian initiation, then, how is it that we can commit ourselves to continuing to form adult Christians? I think it's important, as you've underlined, to focus on those skills of listening, and the kind of listening that we've been trying to practice and model in the synodal process itself is listening not to ideas, and as you discussed, not presenting and sharing information. That can be part of the learning process, of course, but what we've been attending to in the listening process is listening to the lived faith experience of our local churches and discerning. So asking, where is the movement of the Spirit? We're listening with the heart. There's a very Benedictine notion of discernment and listening. And I think a lot of adult members of our communities would benefit greatly by more formation in learning how to be good discerners and learning how to distinguish the movements of what Ignatius of Loyola has called of consolation, the movements in our heart, not the responses of our mind and our intellect, but what moves us closer to God, what will create stronger faith connections and bonds of communion in our communities. And where are the movements of desolation? That means what's impeding us in our journey of following Christ? And what is preventing me from seeing others who might be different than myself, and understanding them as also children of God and worthy of God's love? So I think by putting some emphasis also on skills for discernment, both personal skills and the communal practice of discernment, is a way to help give adult believers a language to name their experience in a faith perspective. I would like to pick up the idea that Sister Natalie underlined about how important it is that we practice this process of listening and discernment together. And even in my personal faith journey, I think we have to also commit ourselves to being accompanied. So if we are faith leaders or leaders in faith formation, then the formators, but also the participants, really need to be prepared to embark on this journey, not alone, not as lone rangers, but also to understand that when I'm going through my life's struggles and adventures, that it's good to have a community to test out my own judgment. So we want to form, I think, adult Christians who are self-reflexive and have that openness always to learn, that openness to evaluate my own decisions. And as a parish or diocesan community, do we build into our processes of discernment and decision-making a time of reflection and evaluation to say, well, what was that a good decision that we took together? Is there some dimension of this thing that we're dealing with that has been neglected or that needs to be brought to bear in our decision, and maybe we need to reevaluate and we could make a different or a better decision going forward. I'm really happy Sister Natalie picked up on the model of the listening circle that is so deeply ingrained in the culture of Canada's Indigenous peoples. And it's something that can be a model for us to learn how to listen without judgment, to listen to others without interruption, to really honor and respect the dignity of every person in the listening circle. Those are really essential skills that I think we can all learn and benefit from, especially in our society and culture where there's so much polarization. Another group of people I've been kind of mindful of thinking about these models of accompaniment and listening is parents. I don't know if we give enough attention to young families in our communities, and to parents even of teenagers who also need to listen to develop a set of skills as accompaniers of their children, and to pass on these skills and to help their children make wise decisions and weigh the many possibilities that they are placed before them in our society, in our world, and know again how to discern what are the movements or things that might be in harmony with the gospel. And there are many options in our society and culture that are not respectful of the value of who I am as a person or the value of others. So how do we really develop that culture in young people? And what's the role of parents also as formators? I think this is really important. And another group of people in our communities in Canada, especially, I also want to bring up, and I belong to this group myself, but we have a tremendous number of single people in our communities that I think, too often neglect because we place such a value on families and family life. But there's so many single young people. I think 1 in 4 Canadians is living alone these days, both young people and then many elderly people. So how do we reach out and accompany these groups of people? The last point I want to make is again to go back and looking at the issues that were raised by so many people in the consultation process of the synod leading up before the assembly. Was so many lay people expressed their hunger to learn how to pray, to learn, I think, to have more spiritual formation that relates to those skills of discernment. But I think there's a great deal of hunger among many members of our communities for basic skills or learning adult forms of prayer. So many, I see this in some of our students who come and they still have I would say, an image of God from their childhood or from their catechesis. And their notions of prayers really fall under the category of pious devotional practices, but they haven't learned the skills of reading the scriptures prayerfully and slowly in a practice of lectio, or discovering practices of quiet meditation, both personally or perhaps in groups or other networks of prayer. So that's a whole other area where I think we could do a whole lot to develop those networks of support for members in our communities. And it should be part of the adult faith formation in all of our local communities. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Kathy. We're very pleased to add your rich insights to what we're receiving. And I know everyone will be keeping track of the things that are resonating and staying with them so that we can carry them forward. Thank you. Dr. Murray Watson, we are very happy now to hear from you.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Sister Natalie and Kathy. I was nodding vigorously and smiling widely as I listened to both of you, because so much of what you said echoed things that I was going to touch on in one way or another. As Carol said, I come to this first as a biblical scholar, but as the adult faith formation animator for a Catholic school board of 51 schools in central Ontario, about an hour and a half north of Toronto. And as part of our research project, I invited my colleagues from a range of school boards across Ontario to come together to discuss what their experiences had been around discussion of 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion in the lives of their school boards, which is certainly one of the most contentious issues in modern Catholic life, as you know. And what I heard from them in those conversations was often, sadly, a sense of fear of engaging in conversations that could easily become heated or polarizing in a time that is already so hyper-polarized. There was a sense that there are spaces in Catholic education, and I think in the church writ large, where those kinds of conversations have not always been welcome or appreciated, or were considered or spoken of as an intrusion of a purely secular agenda into the life of the church. It was also clear that in some region, the lived experiences of 2S LGBTQ plus individuals were not always considered a priority or listened to in church spaces. There were definitely some school boards who have been doing that work with great energy and great success for 10, 15, 20 years, who devote resources to it and see it as an important component of contemporary Catholic life. which highlighted for me the ongoing tensions in our church around discussions of sexuality and identity, as has very recently been underscored by the very different reactions to the Declaration for the Vatican Fiducia Supplicans, released just before Christmas, which suggested that individuals living in relationships which could not be recognized formally by the church could still nonetheless ask for and receive blessings from ministers of the church. And in the last couple of months, we have seen great affirmation of that document from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, from many bishops and many corners of the church, but we have also seen it utterly rejected by entire Episcopal conferences as inappropriate and pastorally confusing in a way that I can never remember in my life ever having happened in the life of the church. So those tensions, I think, are symptomatic of the challenges of discussing controversial topics in a respectful and Christ-centered way. And I think the Synod has really given us a paradigm and a model for how we might do that, showing that it is possible. So those conversations and following the deliberations of the Synod have prompted a few reflections in my own mind about what adult faith accompaniment and formation need to look like today in a truly synodal church. Firstly, and it is everyone who has spoken today has highlighted it from some direction, the vital importance of listening to each other and not simply hearing each other. Before Vatican II, if you were to read a textbook on ecclesiology, many of them would have spoken of the church as broken into two broad categories: the ecclesia docens, the teaching church, and the ecclesia audiens, the listening church, with the first group composed of the Pope, the bishops, and the clergy, and the second group made up of the laity. And if there is anything that the synodal process and Vatican II more generally have taught us, it's that everyone in the church has something to teach us, and everyone in the church needs to be a good, authentic listener. The Pope and the bishops and all of the participants in the Synod really modeled for us what a listening church looks like today, seeking out the Spirit-led instincts and insights of everyone in the church, opening that consultation more widely than we never ever have in modern Catholicism, and making time to really patiently, respectfully listen to and integrate those voices, even when they may make us uncomfortable, even when they stretch us, even when we may personally disagree with them. No voice was excluded from that process a priori. And along with that, the importance, and both Sister Natalie and Dr. Clifford touched on this, the importance of providing tools and teaching tools for prayerful discernment of the many voices that we hear. How do we develop a greater sensitivity to what the Spirit is saying to the church and the churches in our time, beyond simply the majority of the logic of majority rules, which often has much more to do with political power than it does with the will of God for our time and our place. And that's often very countercultural. I believe that truly mature adult faith demands the ability to hear that multiplicity of voices around us in the light of church teaching, in conversation with church teaching, as they have grown and evolved and continue to grow and evolve in our time. And not in a merely fundamentalist or a rigorous way that is simply content to quote official documents or verses from Scripture, but neither in a way that jettisons that rich heritage of wisdom and reflection as something that is irrelevant and passé. And that, I think, implies profound spiritual humility, which is interested in more than simply getting my way in the end. It implies patience. And as we know from our experience of our own spiritual growth, that is a process that cannot be artificially rushed. The other insight that I've heard is the importance of making adult formation settings places of spiritual safety. And again, several speakers have already mentioned this, where people can come together, can speak honestly and comfortably about their own experience, their growth, their struggles, even when their experiences and their views may not always align perfectly with where the church is at institutionally on a particular topic. That implies an ecclesiology that is about welcome and inclusion, the hospitality that Dr. Ann Walsh always highlights when she speaks, as Pope Francis really has modeled for us over the last more than a decade. And I am particularly drawn to his words during his penitential pilgrimage to Canada in July 2022, when he visited the parish of the First Nations in Edmonton, and he said this, I quote, "This place is a house for all, open and inclusive, just as the church itself should be, for it is the family of the children of God, where hospitality and welcome, values typical of Indigenous culture, are essential. A home where everyone should feel welcome, regardless of their past experiences or personal life stories. On the cross, Christ reconciles and brings back together everything that seemed unthinkable and unforgivable. He embraces everyone and everything, everyone and everything." And then I'm reminded of last year during the World Youth Days in Portugal, when the Pope invited the young people to chant after him that the church was for todos, 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 for everyone, for everyone, for everyone. So often there are groups in our church who have not felt comfortable sharing who they really are and where they are really at. And that's often been the case in Catholic education and Catholic ministry as well. People have chosen to self-censor or to bite their tongue out of fear that their real stories and perspectives would not be considered acceptable in church spaces. And so I believe that any church space that demands something less than authenticity of people, in the end, is probably not an authentically Christian space. A synodal church, a church of mature adult faith, is one in which, to use one of Pope Francis's favorite Greek adjectives, people are welcome to speak with parousia, with boldness, with honesty, without fear. But that is the flip side of the idea that God may have something to say to us, even if it is unpopular, uncomfortable, or challenging, because, of course, for those of us who know the scriptures, that is exactly what the voices of the biblical prophets were and why they often suffered during their lifetime. So fostering safe spaces for growth is essential, and I think the Synod models that for us beautifully. So I think those insights connect powerfully with some of the earlier findings of this research project. This is part of the providing competent frameworks and leadership that was surfaced in the first phase, and the need to intentionally meet people where they are and help them make meaning of all their life experiences that was highlighted in the second phase. Overall, I think the Synod's process has shown us what intentional spiritual listening can look like, and the findings of that first General Assembly from last October give us hope that this type of listening still has the ability to transform us and our church into better followers of Jesus in the years and the decades ahead, which is obviously our goal in all of this work as practitioners of adult faith formation and accompaniment in our Canadian church. Thank you.
Murray, thank you for your insights and your wisdom on these important areas of ministry and leadership, and for the way it broadens and I think inspires the kind of reflection we need to do about our adult faith education practice to really be a synodal church. So I invite us all again to keep track of the things that are sparking for us, resonating, inspiring questions and challenges, invitations. And on that note, we move on to our last, but in no way least, presenter for this panel, Ms. Christine Way-Skinner. Christine, over to you.
Okay, so if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen because I am a highly visual learner. And so for those of you who like to see things, I'm going to do that now. I hope this is, can you see my screen? Is it working?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So I'm just going to begin with this quote from the preparatory document. It says, to journey together, we need to let ourselves be educated by the Spirit to a truly synodal mentality. So I really believe that we need to be schooled in this. We need to develop it because it's very new to us. And I want to give you an example from yesterday. I led a retreat for a bunch of really wonderful retired teachers. There were about 50 of them. And we were talking about the man who was born blind and was healed by Jesus, and we were talking about our own blindness and how we cannot be blind, how we can address our own blindness. And so I was talking to them a little bit about synodality and listening and the encounter with the other that can kind of open things up to us. So I said to everyone, I said, during our conversation time, I would like us to try and model this. And I explained what had happened in Rome and the structure of listening. And I said, we're not going to take as long, but let's at least leave 30 seconds between the time that someone speaks and someone start speaking again, a response. So then, I joined a group and we had a conversation, and then I got up and realized that in the group that I was leading, we did not do that. We could not wait to speak after the other person spoke. So it was kind of a humbling experience, and it was so apropos in this retreat about blindness. And, I had to kind of immediately confess to the entire group. And indeed, only one group actually engaged in the synodal effort that I had proposed. So that just reminds me that we are all going to be on a learning curve here. So while Pope Francis is asking us to listen, this is going to require a level of personal maturity for all of us who are lead learners and all of us who are also being taught. And I think of the listening that Pope Francis is asking us to do in synodality as quite comparable to like Lectio Divina, where we listen to Christ in the scriptures, or, what is God saying to us here in the scriptures, or Lectio Divina, or Lectio Visio, where we look at art, or we pray with art, but also synodality is a form of prayer. This kind of listening is a prayerful listening and a very humble listening. And I'm really glad that Murray brought up the idea of parousia, because they're related. So in really, really listening to people and providing an opportunity where people can speak, what we're trying to do is open up a context where people are safe to speak with a boldness. And by boldness, it doesn't mean just being the loudest person in the room or the person who speaks the longest. It means being able to say the thing that is unpopular, that is difficult, that might not go over very well. I always have this line up on my bulletin board in any place I've ever worked, that it's from Father Dan Berrigan, that says, if you're going to follow Jesus, you better look good on wood. Some of the things that the gospel tells us to say are hard to say and hard to listen to, but we need to provide a context where people can, as Murray said, be really authentic and say who they really are and where God is speaking to them. So this journey to maturity is a lifelong pilgrimage. We're never there, any of us. And so we need to do all of our faith formation with this sort of level of humility, so that we can all grow. One of the things that I think is, and this comes partly from Otto Scharmer, he talks about when we're trying to traverse diversity and deal with the polarizations, we need to really move from an ecosystem where it's my way or the highway to an ecosystem. In Catholic terminology, that would be the common good. How do we all work together? Where do we all share wisdom? How, in listening to each other, do we grow by an encounter with the other? So in the synodal documents, there's talk of moving from the I to the we. I would also propose that it's a movement from a clerical model to a communal model or a synodal model. Scharmer has, and I'm just going to move ahead here, when he talks about listening, and I found this very, very helpful to me, he talks about 4 kinds of listening. The first one is downloading, where we just want to hear what we want to hear. I think it was Anne, maybe very early on, spoke about, the echo chamber of, social media. We get together with people that are going to tell us what we want to hear. No one grows that way. Then there's factual listening, where we kind of want to grow, but we just really are interested in making sure that we have like a whole idea. So it's sort of a scientific listening. I want to find out if it's cold outside, so I ask someone else, and if they say, something that I'm not expecting, I actually listen to that. But it's really about me. For Sharma, the next one is empathic listening. We're really trying to do a heart to heart with the other person. We really are interested in listening, but it's connecting, and I would say it's sort of like pastoral care listening. But what we're looking for in this adult faith formation model that we're talking about, and in synodality, is what Sharma calls generative listening. So we're looking for the future that's going to emerge. What is being said here that is about, in Christian terms, because Otto Sharma is working, sort of from a more secular point of view. What is God trying to say to us about the coming reign, about the building of the kingdom of God? And so that's a very different kind of listening, because it's a listening even deeper than just to understand what the other person is saying. One of my absolute favorite lines from the synod came from the retreat that Timothy Radcliffe gave, in which he talked about the Emmaus journey, but he talked about how even in his own order, even the people that you disagree with the most, that seem to be saying something that's even a bit ridiculous, you still listen to them, because every single person has something to teach you about God. And in fact, the greatest gifts are going to come from the people with whom we disagree, if we dare to listen to them. And he says, we are mendicants after the truth, poor people walking through history, learning as much as we can, but especially from the people who are the most different from us, because those are the people that are going to bring us the farthest. I'm just going to end with these two quotes. This is what Pope Francis says the purpose of synodality is: to plant dreams, draw forth prophecies and visions, allow hope to flourish, inspire trust, bind up wounds, weave together relationships, awaken a dawn of hope, learn from one another, create a bright resourcefulness that will enlighten minds, warm hearts, give strength to our hands. Easy peasy. It's such a big and marvelous vision, and it's really what we understand as the reign of God. And sometimes I think I have felt in my role in the church that I can feel a bit overwhelmed by what it means to do all this, to work with people, to really take the incredible amount of time it takes to listen, to find out where they are and what their needs are. But I found a quote that helps me, and this is my quote. E.L. Doctorow wrote this about writing, but I think it well applies to those of us who are, engaged in any kind of adult faith formation, or any kind of work in the church for that matter. It's like driving at night with the headlights on. You can only see a little way ahead of you, but you can make the whole journey that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
I just got to find out how to shut my screen off now.
Just the screen share. There you go.
There I go.
Great. Thank you. Do you all agree with me that we've received 4 very rich and meaningful perspectives on this topic? Yes? Yes, thank you to our presenters. You've given us so much to consider, to reflect on, to think about. Yes. I'd like to open up the space now to all of us as engaged participants here today, a community of practice of our own. Let's start with this. What is one thing that you heard during this panel presentation that is really resonating for you. Let's hear a few of those things, and then we'll open the space if you have any questions you'd like to ask that we could explore. But first, what's resonating, what's sparking for you from what you've heard today? Who would like to start? Terry, are you ready to speak, or is your microphone open? Yes, Terry, please.
One of the things that I particularly found, I guess because it aligned with what I've been thinking all along since the Synod was introduced, is this area where we need to discern, not only at that personal level, but at the communal level. And what does that mean? And what are the techniques behind that? And what are the experiences that draw us into that? Because if we can do that better, I think the questions that are posed in those synodal conversations and are posed by us to God in those silences, in the spiritual conversations, will be met in a more authentic way, in a non-judgmental way, in a way that people will consider. And I think that's where the growth in our church is going to happen.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Charlene, please.
And it's kind of building on what Terry said. The aspect of discernment really resonated with me as well. But in particular, something Catherine Clifford said about the hunger to learn how to pray. And I don't think you can have discernment if you don't have prayer. So adults need to experiential ways of learning how to pray as adults. So that's something that, really resonated with me a lot. That also is a kind of a precursor to be able to discern well, and part of the skill set, I suppose, of discerning.
Thank you, Charlene. Yes, please, Sholi. Oh, Sholi, are you speaking and you're muted? Oh, there we go.
I have a question, not a comment.
Okay, we'll allow that. It's coming next, but you can take us there.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for your valuable insights. My question is direct to Dr. Clifford and or to you, Dr. Carroll, as both of you were my professors. So considering the upcoming post-synod period and considering various factors, what your recommendation, especially when you say we privilege the process method over the program method, would you advise for us as chaplaincy leaders to use in our faith, adult faith teachings? Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, would you like to respond first?
Sure. Thanks, Jolie, for the question. Right now, we don't have to wait till after the assembly next fall, but right now, local churches are being invited to ask ourselves, how do we do this? And if we see that there's a skill set that people don't have, we should ask, then how do we get it? What needs to happen so people can have the training and the skills and the practice to be better discerners, or to learn these learning skills? And this has to happen at every level, both training the trainers, forming clergy, forming lay people also.
Thank you, Kathy. And I'll add to Kathy's response. We are, I think, discovering in practice and in reflecting on our practice more and more what the kind of content, integral content and process looks like in practice.
Yeah.
And certainly in the research we're doing, and we're not the only ones coming to this by any means, but certainly in the research we're doing at CREC, developing these very intentional processes that have steps to them, particular framing that's done in each step. They're very learner centered. They're built upon the idea of the lead learner, that we're in a relationship with the people with whom we're journeying in faith. And these processes can take us step by step through the kind of learning environment that does help. As has been pointed out, I mean, the Holy Spirit is the educator, the formator for sure. But what we can do is open up the spaces that give the best possible opportunity for that integration, faith and life, that learning and faith to happen. And we are developing more and more, I think, a very intelligent awareness of the practice that helps that happen. Mary Ellen, please, we would love to hear from you.
Well, first of all, I can just say yes to so much of what's already been said. So what I'm going to focus on, though, I certainly want to affirm from my own experience and listening to others the importance of allowing or offering opportunities for people to explore prayer. How do I pray? What fits for me? What's real prayer? Just people have lots of questions. And that really includes, who is God for me? You know, as I think at least one of the panelists has said before, people often bring, what they learned as children. So the image of God, the way of praying or not praying, never maybe having really stopped to say, today, in all my journey through life, who is God for me? So I definitely want to affirm that. And what I've also experienced in my own life, and I think fits with everything that's being said here, is opening myself or inviting even opportunities to be with people whom I don't know a whole lot about. I've never had the opportunity to be close to and have a meaningful conversation, to hear what their perspective is on life. I mean, I just remember a point in my life where I really heard a call from within me to learn more about Black people. I realized in my life, I had not had opportunities to be that much with Black people. By golly, after that, it was incredible how Black people started coming into my life. And I could learn, these were people often who were coming from Africa. So valuable. When Dr. Watson talked about LGBTQ2S, my goodness, I was in a parish that already had made it clear to the general population that they were open to welcoming all, including LGBT. My goodness, people come when they hear they're going to be welcome. And one of the members decided, or at least said, that he'd like to start a group that would be started by LGBTQ. And anyone who wanted to come and be with them to learn more, to share together. And I joined it. And my goodness, what an incredible experience that was. Of late, we're talking about deafness, but there's also blindness. I've had more opportunity to be with blind people. And again, a whole world. So I really would love the church to open up opportunities for people to meet with those whom they've never spent much time with. They don't know what their world is like. And interestingly, my being a sister, I don't always broadcast that I am. But when people do find out, they will come to me and say, you know, I know I just can't talk to others about this, about faith and about God, but I know I can talk to you about it.
Thank you,
Just,
Mary Ellen.
yeah.
Thank you. Such rich sharing. Carol, are you waiting to speak? Have you been trying to get in there, Carol Williams-Bogle? Oh, you're muted, Carol.
I've just seen Kay's hand going up a number of times. I think she'd like to get in.
Okay. All right. Kay, please, we'd be happy to hear from you.
I'd like to say two things, if I may. First, as I'm sitting beside Mary Ellen Francoeur, I'd like to say that I first learned to pray, Mary Ellen, from another Tom, my own dad, Tom Duffin, but that Dr. Tom Francoeur was also a person in my life as a young adult at St. Joseph's Teachers College who spoke to many of us young adolescents there about prayer and so on. So I'd like to say thanks to him and nice to see you. The second thing I'd like to say is where I live, I feel my experience has been that the majority of people, both that I know that are in the pews and not, don't really know what synodality is about. And I found the presentation today, I think I wrote every word, because I think there's something basic there. It's sort of like the two S's we've been throwing around, you know, the synod on synodality. Well, which synod? Well, we just had a synod. Is it the other synod? Well, you know, having been there for all of them these last years, I think there's something basic there because it is new. It's very new. And we have to learn as adults and people who have been so used to, especially those of us academics, to speaking so often and so lengthy, to keep quiet and listen to the other. I don't know how we do this, but I'm going away from this with an increased awareness that when I deal with some people that I hope to be dealing with in the near future, that will be one of an emphasis that I would like to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay, very much. We're going to hear very briefly from Dr. Christine Taylor and then Paul Massel. And then we need time to go into groups where we can have a different kind of more personal conversation with each other. So Christine and then Paul.
Really briefly, when we're talking about parents, and I love what was said about, you know, that parents also need to be learning. We also need to be considering their growth in faith themselves, right? That they are also people on a journey. And often when they come for sacraments, they're coming with so much need to learn themselves. And the second group that I think we need to be considering, there's so much shame. And I love the conversation around safe spaces, creating people's safe spaces. But there's so much shame in our society and in the church. Shame when someone in your family chooses euthanasia. Shame when someone commits suicide. Shame when someone has mental health issues. Shame when you're divorced and remarried. And there's no places for people to talk about those things.
Thank you, Christine. Paul, please.
Thank you very much. I remember one of the words that's really standing out here today in all our talks is that word formation. And I remember 25 years ago standing at the seminary door, and I was already mid-40s when I answered that call. But in me was that fear of what would happen to me in this formation. Would I lose myself? Would I have to let go? Would I have to become something else? Was this priest going to be something other than who was really me? And now my experience was that in that journey, I discovered, I believe, my truest self. But there was a lot of fear there. And in a certain sense, I think moving to the synodal church from what is a clerical church, I think within our faith community and in the world, there is a lot of fear and a lot of lack of trust as to in that formation of even a preparation for a sacrament, whatever it may be, can I discover in the experience of that my truest self, as opposed to maybe having to give up myself? Or Murray's conversation with the LGBTQ community. Am I welcomed as my truest self? So formation is really interesting, and the dicastery on faith there now talking about its maybe evolution from becoming an evangelical mission as opposed to a policing mission is really a wonderful thing. And synodal is that accepting of every human being. And I think in the experience, and we've used experience a lot today too, from a program to process. Often in the mystagogy falling apart after the preparation for sacraments, it's because they haven't had the experience in the program. And so they don't see the value of mystagogy as of that experience coming alive and forever growing within the person. So I just wanted to share that whole idea about, my misgivings about that word formation. And maybe in a certain sense, a good number of people are standing at the door and wondering whether they want to go in or not. And they do fear judgment. They do have fear, and they need to develop trust. And I think that's something that we need to really work on in our moving forward. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Paul. Before we move to our groups, I just want to invite our 4 panelists. Is there anything you've heard in these questions and conversation that you would like to respond to before we move to the next steps? So Sister Natalie, Dr. Catherine, Dr. Murray, and Ms. Christine. Yes, please, Sister Natalie.
Yes, thank you for all you have shared. It's very interesting, and I resonate with a lot of things. I will just highlight what you have said, Father Paul, I think, about fears. And I think that's very important because, in any kind of organization, when you have a call for change, you have fears and resistance. And we know in the corporate world, we have even people who are specialized in change management. And if we have this dynamic vision of identity, and synodality is a call for conversion, personal conversion and collective and communal conversion. So it's very normal to have fear. And I think that's a great part, as you have highlighted, also in a process of formation for people through these safe spaces to give the possibility to speak about fears and to share about that. And that was exactly our experience during the 3 days retreat at the beginning of the Assembly of the Synod. We started spiritual conversation, and the first 2 days, it was about the fears bishops and others shared when they arrive at the Synod. And then that is discernment, that is the key point, and I really resonate about your emphasis on helping people to learn how to discern. Discernment is about, are we led by our fears, or are we led by what we discern as the call of the Spirit? And you will still have fears, but if you really want to follow, to answer the call of the Spirit, you will be able to cross your fears. And so I think it's very, very important. And just a brief thing about this. I have read a question about the hierarchical dimension and the synodal dimension. And I think it's important to recall that from the beginning, the church has both synodal dimensions, that is constitutive, the communal, we are all baptized, and a hierarchical dimension. So it's not to suppress one, but to exercise the minister of authority with a new style of leadership that is a style of listening, discernment, and consultation. And that's required, we haven't talked about it, but that's also a very important part to learn this new style of leadership that is the synodal style, because the bishop will remain the bishop, the priest will remain the priest, those who are leaders in different aspects of the church will be leaders, but it's about a new style of leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Natalie. Any of our other panelists? Yes, Kathy, please.
Thanks. I'm really grateful for all the points that have been raised, and I just want to just reaffirm that neither shame nor fear are gifts of the Spirit. And when we encounter them, we have to help people understand that this is not what God desires. And how do we, help them move beyond this? So I also want to just comment on a point that was made by Kay a while back when she says synodality. It's true, very few people know what it's about, but it sounds like something really simple. It's about baptism, baby. It's that simple. I mean, it's really honoring the dignity and the gifts of every baptized Christian, every member of our community, and trusting that they've been gifted with God's Spirit and that God, even without us, God is accompanying each person. And so we can't do without their gifts and their wisdom and their experience. And we need to make space for all of that.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, Marie, please, and then Christine.
Just, in the discussion about this, for so many of us, the synodal concept seems like something new, but a term that Sister Natalie will appreciate that's very dear to us in theology, which is ressourcement, which is going back to the sources. A lot of what we are doing now is a rediscovery of models that have existed at other times and other places in the church. We are not creating something entirely new. We are renewing a practice that is actually very, very old, very ancient in the church. And one of the places that I think we can look for some wonderful examples of this is religious life. I don't want to romanticize religious life. I do a lot of work with religious, but I think that religious communities, monastic communities, have lots of wisdom to speak to the rest of the church in terms of what this looks like. What does communal listening and discernment look like? But also we have today this fear of the other, this xenophobia, but the monastic tradition had a contrary virtue, which was philoxebia, which was love of that which is different. And I think we need to cultivate that in our church and in our world today. How do we love those who are different? How do we be curious about them? How do we include them? And that comes from the monastic tradition that I think monastic and religious life has a lot to offer to us in these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Christine, you have something to add, please. Oh, you're muted, Christine.
Yeah, two things that just came up in the conversation. One is the person that is most responsible for forming me in my faith is my great-grandmother. So, I had lots of priests, I had lots of teachers, I had lots of professors, but that really early time of her sharing who she was with me was absolutely formative. And so, when I was speaking to these women yesterday, we need their voices in the church, and that includes in their homes and in the conversations that they have while they're making sandwiches for funerals. So that's the first thing, is just that demographic doesn't often get mentioned, and they're so important. And the second thing about diversity, I'm always struck by the teaching of Thomas Aquinas when he was reflecting on the diversity of creation and asking questions about why are there so many kinds of grass? Why are there so many kinds of flowers? Why are it's an abundance that is kind of ridiculous. It's just way over the top when you look at how much diversity is in creation. And his conclusion was that each creature, each thing that is created has to tell us something about who God is. If we want to know who God is, we have to let it all in. We have to listen to everybody and everything that God has created, because that's how we will hear God and hear God's voice. And for everything that we exclude and say we can't hear about God from that person or that group of people or that style of prayer or that theological tradition, anything that we exclude a priori, we cut off a piece of the discernment, which was a great conversation that we had. We a piece of God's revelation to us, and that's just always been a really important insight to me from Thomas Aquinas.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you to all of our panelists and to all of you among us who have contributed your insights and your questions. I want to give us an opportunity now for a more direct conversation with one another, a greater level of participation, if you will, that a small group offers us. So you're going to find yourself in just a moment in a relatively small group of people with someone there with you who's been asked to help facilitate the conversation. And here's what we're going to be discussing, just as a way to bring this important session to some productive closure for us. So, what is staying with me and resonating, inviting, and challenging for my perspectives and practice? So, just take a few minutes to unpack that a little bit together. And then, second, what needs to happen for me and for us as a community, as a church, to act on what we're hearing, and learning? What do we need? And then finally, how can we help and support one another? So we just invite you to take some time with those 3 points. I'll project these into your breakout rooms so that you don't have to remember them. What is staying with me, resonating, inviting, challenging for my perspectives and practice? What needs to happen for us, for me and for us, to act on what we are hearing and learning? How can we help and support one another? So as I mentioned, you're going to find yourself in a group with only, I'm sorry, it's brief, but I hope it will be meaningful, about 15 minutes to discuss those things together. And then we'll come back here and share at least a few echoes from your conversations. Does that sound okay, everyone? Yes, you're ready for that? Okay, so off to your breakout rooms and wishing you good conversations. Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Did you have some good conversations? Good. It's wonderful to see all of those heads nodding and the thumbs going up. We have precious little time together left. And I don't know if you're feeling the same as me. I wish we could continue for a very long time. But to honor the time that we do have, it would be great. We know we can't be in any way exhaustive about hearing feedback. But it would be really great for all of us just to hear a couple of echoes from your conversations. Again, we won't be able to hear from all of the groups, but I wonder if the leaders of the groups, and by the way, just to respond to earlier conversation, we could think about leadership as a term that refers to being at the service of others. Just food for thought. But the leaders of those groups, could we just hear an echo of an important insight or two that was shared in your groups? Jan, please, thank you.
Oh, just a delightful conversation with people that are just all on the same page. But I just wanted to say that what came out right away was this idea of program to process. And just about everybody was saying that sitting in their head was, but how? But how? And then they wanted to say that they felt that today it was opened up for them a bit. The how was kind of illustrated in what they heard today. Like there were just lots of examples of that. And then we just talked about, sorry?
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Anne. Thank you, Jan.
And then we just talked about, being present and listening to stories. And we kind of had a little bit of a talk about sometimes the reality in life is a little gentler and nicer than the reality within the church community. Sorry about that, but that's part of what came out. We were just laughing about that, and there was a little bit of talk about RCIA and sometimes how the rigidity in rules sometimes doesn't meet the life experience of the people that we're working with. And that's where the flexibility part comes in. Anyway, everybody learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. That's wonderful to hear. Anne, Murray, and then Christine, can I invite you just maybe one key insight, although I know there are many things you could share?
Sure. One key insight. It had to do with the affirmations, what resonated with us. The challenges were amazing, but it was that hunger. It was really simple. What we heard and what resonated with us was the hunger of the people gathered on this screen or these screens to have conversations that matter and to share with a community of practice, but to have those conversations.
Thank you, Anne. So important. Murray, please, an echo from your group.
Just the affirmation of the importance of listening, how countercultural that is, how difficult it is on an individual level, and how that challenges all of us to try and be better in our pastoral work and our personal lives.
Thank you, Murray. Christine, an echo from your group.
So lots of what the other people just said. So looking at the second question, we talked about the need for ourselves to keep growing our own skills through practicing them, to keep growing in our own faith, and a really requirement for trusting in the Spirit to act boldly.
Thank you, Christine. Catherine Kelly, please, an echo from your group.
We heard that some of this isn't new, that we've experienced this. Maybe it's listening, maybe it's discernment, maybe we feel like leaven, and going to where people are, meeting like young people. They love to do things to improve the world. So going where they are and meeting them there, bringing the church there to them.
Thank you, Catherine. Corinne, thank you.
For us, there was a big part of knowing that with the adults that they are varied. When we gather together as adults, that we are not all in the same place in the same moment. We had that image, that was given to us from Christine Weiss Skinner. And it is like an ecosystem, and all of it, sometimes there's dying things in a prairie field, sometimes there's growing things, busy insects, all of those contribute to the whole. And that it's patience, and we have to have openness to hear the story, and most importantly, that it does take time, and it is a process that is a long process.
Thank you, Corinne. Christine Weiss Skinner, please.
So we talked a little bit about overwhelm. How do we implement that? Sometimes because in our context, there's an effort to impose a different kind of model. Here's a bunch of videos, you should use these. And so this is something that isn't, not everybody buys into this model. And so that's a reality of the context. We talked about the RCA as a really great model for how this can work. We talked about the importance of sharing our own vulnerability, because that sometimes opens up people to feel like they can speak. There was lots more, but that's 3 main points.
Thank you, Christine. Cindy, please.
Again, we had a ton of really rich ideas that came up, but I just want to highlight 2. One is the need for lead learners to be attentive to the agency of learners, and how that gets expressed in the faith formation context. And the second is the role of fear, the role that fear plays in blocking formation, and kind of as a subset of that, the role that polarization in the church can play in cultivating that kind of fear that can then block formation.
So much there. Thank you, Cindy. Joe, please.
So I had the opportunity to meet a lot of wonderful people who seem to be on a journey of transition. Everyone talked a little bit about how things are changing in their lives right now, but they felt energized. We talked about the importance of prayer and knowing our craft so that we can enjoy the process more.
Thank you. Well, we know hearing those few echoes in a rushed fashion isn't intended to be in any way comprehensive or exhaustive, but it gives us a taste of some of the things we were discussing, which is important for us as a community to be able to receive. So thank you for all of that. And we know that the discussions we have certainly do not either begin or end here. And we hope that the things that have been sparked and have been coming to the surface, we will all find ways to continue as we move away from our session together. I want to bring us to a close by thanking all of you for your wonderful engagement. How fortunate we are to be able to come together like this and grow together by being a community of practice. Thank you to all of you. And a special thank you to our conversation interview partners in our first part 1 and to our wonderful panelists in part 2. Thank you to all of you for making this just such a rich and valuable time of sharing and growing in the important work that we do. As we come to a close, I just want to quickly mention, we are currently analyzing the data that we've just finished in phase 4 of our action research project. So forthcoming will be a 4th resource to present our findings for the use of the community of practice to support our practice. So we will keep you in the loop. We're also working on an edited volume with co-authors from across the country, a text for adult faith education, a Canadian resource for adult faith education based upon our research and other things. So stay tuned. We're due to have a launch of that in the fall. Again, we'll keep you in the loop. We are starting a certificate program in the fall of 2024, this fall, for 12 people. We want to run a pilot for a certificate in adult faith education accompaniment. So if you're interested, let me know. We're looking forward to launching that and to beginning something that we hope again can continue to support us in good practice for the important work that we do in the church in Canada. To come to a close, I thought a nice way to end could be for us to pray together this wonderful prayer of the Synod. So I'm going to just get my screen set up so that I can see the prayer properly. There we are. And we can pray this together. We stand before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather together in your name. With you alone to guide us, make yourself at home in our hearts. Teach us the way we must go and how to pursue it. We are weak and sinful. Do not let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life and not stray from the way of truth and what is right. All of this we ask you, who are at work in every place and time, in the communion of the Father and the Son, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all for joining us today. There will be a recording sent to you following when it's available, and we look forward to continuing the journey together as we move forward in this important work for the life of the person and the life of the church and the world. Take care. God bless everyone. Bye for now.